It was a cold morning, the kind where the air bites your skin and the sky looks like it's holding its breath. A man in a sleek black car drove down a lonely road, his face tight with tension. In the back seat sat a little girl, clutching her teddy bear like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. She didn't know what was coming, but fate had other plans. On that quiet morning, Richard Kennedy pulled his luxury car into a secluded riverside spot. Beside him sat 5-year-old Grace Monroe, who hadn't said a word since they left their mansion. Her small hands gripped her stuffed bear tightly. She knew something was wrong. The trees stood tall and silent, watching as Richard unloaded Grace's wheelchair from the trunk. His jaw was clenched, his eyes distant, filled with a coldness no father should ever wear. Grace looked around nervously. "Daddy, why are we here so early?" Her voice trembled slightly. "Quiet," he snapped, harsher than he meant to. He wasn't cruel by nature, but desperation had made him cold. He adjusted the wheelchair, cursing under his breath, when he saw a chestnut-colored horse grazing nearby. The horse lifted its head, ears twitching. Sensing something off about the scene near the riverbank, Richard ignored the animal and wheeled Grace toward a small dock. The river was swollen from recent rains, its current swift and dangerous. Each creak of the wooden planks sent a shiver through Grace's spine. "I don't want to go on the boat today, Daddy," she whispered. "It's too dark." But Richard wasn't listening. He helped her into a small rowboat tied to the dock, scanning the area to make sure they were alone. The horse watched intently from the shore, its instincts flaring at the tension in the air. Richard pushed off the oars, slicing through the water. Grace sat curled up, hugging her bear, tears silently streaming down her face. Something was very wrong. Suddenly, the horse reared up, neighing loudly, as if trying to warn anyone, that something terrible it was about to happen. Richard rowed steadily until they reached the center of the river, where the current was strongest and the water deep and unforgiving. He stopped rowing. Grace looked up at him with wide, fearful eyes. "Poppy," she whispered, "I'm scared." Richard didn't answer. He stood slowly, his shadow looming over her like a storm cloud. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with a determination that chilled Grace to the bone. Then, without a word, he grabbed her shoulders and shoved her into the icy water. The splash echoed across the still river. Grace disappeared beneath the surface, stunned by the cold and the shock of betrayal. Above, Richard stood motionless, watching as the ripples spread outward, but fate had not yet decided to let her go. From the shore, the chestnut horse bolted forward, leaping into the water without hesitation. Its powerful legs churned against the current, cutting through the waves with fierce determination. Grace sank deeper, her limbs numb, her lungs burning. Just as darkness blurred her vision, she felt something brush against her arm. A rope. She reached out blindly, fingers grasping for life, and caught hold of the horse's thick mane. With incredible strength, the animal surged toward the opposite bank, pulling Grace along. Her tiny fingers clung to its mane, her only lifeline. In a world gone cold, back on the original shore, Richard stared in disbelief before rowing frantically back, panic replacing the cold calculation in his eyes. He couldn't believe his plan ruined by a horse. On the far side of the river, an old farmer named Harold Reagan spotted the commotion. He dropped his bucket and ran toward the bank, heart pounding. As the horse reached the shore, Harold rushed forward and pulled Grace onto dry land. She coughed violently, gasping for air as Harold checked her pulse. "She's alive," he murmured, relief washing over him. "You're safe now, little one." The horse stood beside them, panting heavily, its sides slick with river water. It nudged Grace gently with its nose, as if checking on her. Harold wrapped her in his coat, whispering reassurances as he carried her toward his modest farmhouse. The horse followed closely behind, never straying far from the child it had just saved. Inside, Harold settled Grace on the couch, wrapping her in blankets. He made tea while the horse waited by the window, its large brown eyes never leaving the girl. Grace didn't speak, just stared blankly ahead, shaken beyond words. Later that night, the news broke. Grace Monroe had gone missing after a supposed boating accident. Her father, Richard Kennedy, appeared on television, shedding crocodile tears. For the cameras, Harold turned off the TV, disgusted. He looked at Grace sleeping peacefully on the couch, then at the horse standing guard by the window. "You saved her," he whispered to the animal. "Now, I have to protect her." Over the next few days, Harold learned more about Grace's story. Her mother, Jacqueline Monroe, had vanished months earlier, leaving behind cryptic notes hinting at danger. Grace, unable to walk due to a rare condition, had been left vulnerable. Richard had taken advantage of that, seeing her inheritance as a way to fund his failing business empire. But Harold wasn't about to let that happen. He called on his neighbor, Eleanor King, a kind-hearted woman who quickly became part of their makeshift family. Together, they vowed to keep Grace Safavian, if it meant going against the powerful Richard Kennedy. Meanwhile, the chestnut horse whom Grace, lovingly named Thunder, refused to leave her side. Whether it was instinct or something deeper, the bond between them was undeniable. Days turned into weeks. Thunder stayed close, always alert, always protective, and slowly, Grace began to open up. One evening, as Thunder rolled in the distance, Grace whispered, "Mama said, good people come when you need them most." Harold smiled gently. "She sounds like a wise woman." "I miss her," Grace said softly, clutching a silver locket around her neck. Inside was a photo of her and her mom. "We'll find her," Harold promised. Together, what happened? Next, Eleanor discovered a hidden diary belonging to Jacqueline, revealing shocking secrets about Richard's shady business dealings and how he had faked Jacqueline's disappearance. More importantly, it contained clues pointing to a hidden location, a place Jacqueline had described in bedtime stories. A house surrounded by blue butterflies. Harold and Eleanor realized this could be the key to exposing Richard and reuniting Grace with her mother. They devised a risky plan: sneak into town during the annual Harvest Festival, using the chaos as cover to access the local bank vault where Jacqueline had stored crucial documents. Grace, disguised as Eleanor's granddaughter, played her role beautifully. But just as they accessed the vault, Richard showed up. Just when all seemed lost, Thunder created a distraction outside, galloping wildly through the crowd, causing enough confusion for Grace and her allies to escape with the evidence. They raced to the secret location, a peaceful cottage surrounded by wildflowers and swarms of bright blue butterflies. There, waiting with tear-filled eyes, was Jacqueline. Mother and daughter collapsed into each other's arms, sobbing with joy. Jacqueline explained everything: how she had faked her disappearance to gather proof against Richard, knowing he would stop at nothing to steal her fortune and control Grace's inheritance. With the evidence in hand, authorities arrested Richard for fraud, attempted murder, and falsifying legal documents. Grace was finally free. If you're watching this story unfold and feeling inspired by the courage of a little girl, the loyalty of a brave horse, and the kindness of strangers who became family, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment, sharing what touched you most, and let us know if you'd like to hear more stories about hope, heroism, and the power of love. Because sometimes the most unlikely heroes appear when we need them most. And so, Grace, Jacqueline, Harold, Eleanor, and Thunder found peace in the cottage among the blue butterflies. The house, once a place of mystery, became a sanctuary, filled with laughter, warmth, and the scent of Eleanor's famous apple pies. Grace grew stronger every day, both in body and spirit. With therapy and Thunder's constant companionship, she dreamed of riding him one day, not as a passenger, but as his partner. Jacqueline opened a small foundation to help families in crisis. Inspired by the kindness shown to her and Grace, Harold and Eleanor moved into the cottage permanently, becoming unofficial grandparents to Grace, showering her with love and wisdom, and Thunder. He remained Grace's guardian, always by her side, always ready to protect her, even in the darkest moments. There is always hope, and sometimes it arrives on four hooves.